Do you have an all-star HR team? You may feel your team is already performing at a high level, but let's take a closer look. Would your company's top leaders and employees agree that your HR team are operating at a high level? Are team members able to influence top executives on difficult topics? Are team members' business and strategy focused on the challenges the organization is facing? Does the executive team trust your direct reports as advisors on human capital issues? If you can answer yes to these questions, you have built an outstanding team. If you feel there is room for improvement, Strategy Focused Group can create a custom development program to elevate the quality of your HR team. We use HCI certification programs as well as non-certified HRBP MBA Masterclass to give your team a laser focus on the business and strategy. Please email us at info@strategyfocusedgroup.com.
Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. I am in Islamabad, Pakistan today. And today we are so proud to have Lynn Chong, who is the regional head of talent and organizational effectiveness and inclusion for the APAC region and Middle East region for British American Tobacco. She has a keen interest in shaping organizational culture. Her breadth of experience spans across HR business partnering, change management, talent center of excellence space, and has had an amazing career from Malaysia to Singapore to Japan, and she is presently in Hong Kong. Quite a journey. Thank you for being a guest.
Thank you so much, Ron, for having me. Very excited to be here today.
I'm excited too, because I've followed your career over the years, and every time I look, there's another promotion going here, going there. So walk us through the career journey, because now you're regional head covering that large region, and you started from here, and now you're here. And that doesn't happen in any kind of a way. Walk us through that.
Thank you so much, Ron. So yeah, I've known you now for at least a good 5-6 years, I think, when I attended your strategic HRBP course, and that was one of the most impactful training that I still remember. So I think back then I was still relatively just starting out my career, pretty much. So I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I had a degree in microbiology, but very quickly on, I realized that is not what I can do in my life as a career. I just didn't have the genuine interest there. So from then, after graduation, I really embarked on looking, what do I want to do as a career for the next 30 years or so? And I realized that the corporate environment is an interesting one for me. So I joined BAT through their graduate program. So it was a 2-year program back then where I joined the HR function, and I had the privilege of rotating into 5 different departments within 2 years. So it was a very stretched program of quick projects, and also it really aims to accelerate individuals' development. So I remember just going into that 2-year program, I was exposed immediately to very senior stakeholders. I was brought in for, we had a unionized environment, so I was brought in for union negotiation, and those were like aggressive. And I was also brought in to join meetings with like the Ministry of Manpower back then. So it was really early exposure and a lot of trust given to me. And it was also projects end to end. So I did cover the HR business partnering side, change management projects. So has to do with restructuring very early on, and also the talent development space. Yeah.
That's quite a program. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So basically, I think I spent a good 5 years in Malaysia, and it's really within the breadth of HR in various different projects and departments. And I moved to Japan 3 years ago and Hong Kong last year.
Okay. Yeah, because every time we talk, for the most part, you've been in another country to do that. But, I love that model because they brought you in on kind of I'm going to say an accelerated program.
Yeah.
So you spend some time here, you spend some time here. Let's talk about the new workforce that comes in, and they're frustrated because they're in a boring job, and they say, you know what, this is not for me. I mean, you came in with microbiology. That's heavy lifting. And all of a sudden, you choose this career, and you just took off. would you say that model works from a learning and development perspective?
Oh,
Exposure.
100%. I'm a strong advocate for that model. I think, especially with the new generation coming through, there are a lot
Yeah.
of very eager, very passionate individuals, and there's so much. They're just very different. They grasp concepts and information so quickly, and because they are
Mm-hmm.
just natural at just connecting with people. So that's where I think the exposure becomes so important. People don't want to be just stuck doing a very routine day-to-day work. It's a lot to do with what's in it for my development. And for them,
Mm-hmm.
of course, they look around and see how the leaders behave and how they work. It's truly the kind of impactful work that you give to them and the kind of
Yeah.
exposure they get as well. Because as much as they are eager to learn, we need to also recognize they need credit as well. They need to be
Yeah.
visible. They want to own their
Mm-hmm.
project, their work. So
Mm-hmm.
and that's how they really operate with trust. So if you are
Yeah.
able to trust your team members, let them go and try and speak to the senior people, go and present to very senior forums. And that's how they learn. They either do an amazing presentation and feel really great after that, or they might bomb the presentation and then really take that as a lesson in humility. And from then on,
Yeah.
that's how they learn as well. So giving them that
Yeah.
safe space to really try, and that was what was provided to me about almost a decade ago. That safe space to do really well or probably fail in that particular task, but still eventually
Yeah.
learn from there on.
But I always say there's an intense amount of learning in failure if you reflect on the failure, because you have to learn from that to move forward. That's the Ron Thomas version of it.
Oh, definitely,
Would you?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think learning from failure is one, learning from really tough stakeholders is also the other part that really grows individuals very quickly.
Mm. So you talked about leaders, the way they behave. We're watching these people. I gave a speech yesterday, here in Islamabad for a leadership conference, and one of the things I said that, they talked about the Great Resignation. I say it's not. It's the Great Recalibration. People are trying to decide: do I really want to stay here and deal
Exactly.
with what I'm dealing with, or do I want to say, let me go and try and explore?
Yeah, very true. Because especially the younger generation today, even for the millennials who are now making up the majority of the workforce, people
Yeah.
are just a lot more aware about the options they have out there. And every company is fighting really hard to get their best talent. So when the individuals know that they are worth a certain level, they are good, they are willing to learn, they are very
Yeah.
highly sought after. So of course it's
Mm.
really true. The great recalibration is, I think, a very apt term to really brand the
Yeah.
times of today.
You know what? You could have come here and give the speech, and I could have sat on the side because that's the exact same thing I told him. But sometimes the so-called C-suite, I have questions with that sometimes because they came up in a different time zone, and what worked for them that should be the model because they made it and they're successful. And I think the biggest impediment inside of organization is the leaders and the way they behave and the message they send.
Yeah.
I can say that because I don't report to any of these people up top.
Very true. I think that's also how you shape the workforce. Culture is one, but that's how you shape the capability of the workforce too. Because I still vividly remember how I was when I started my career. So it's only
Mm,
been 8.5 years for me. And for me, what was really key back then and how I learned as much as I could was go volunteering to go into meetings. Some of the meetings I just say, can I please just shadow how you conduct this particular meeting? Some of them I just volunteer. Can I just present a short part of it? Because what I really went in there for is not really about the work that I was doing as much as it was for me to observe how the leaders communicate. How did they
yeah,
engage with each other? How did they debate with each other? And how did they make decisions finally? So even when it comes to decision making, is it a unanimous decision? Was everybody on board and all democratic, or did somebody take an executive decision, and when did they take it? So very early on, that was what I really was enjoying as part of my job. And that's what I still
yeah,
advocate today. So as much as possible for my team members, I always bring them into meetings with me. And sometimes I tell them it's just for you to observe. You might think this is a waste of time, but really just observe how we talk and how we decide things and take it into what makes your personal branding after that. What do you like about it? Make it yours. And what you don't like, learn that that's not how you should behave. So it's a lot of learning from just observing.
I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm thinking, you sound just like me when I was doing the same thing inside a corporate. Younger and going inside a corporate and seeing and sitting in meetings. Because I tell, as you know, I do HRBP development, and I said, you need to sit in these meetings, even from a position of understanding how people present, understanding the issues that are being talked about. And so, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I don't want to. Nobody's asking you to present. Just sit there and listen. It's a learning experience. But sometimes that's hard for a younger person to understand that. You use it. So what you're saying is that you use all of these situations as a learning experience when you watch the leaders interact and the thought process and who's asking questions, and you're trying to get an inference on the power plays inside of the room, which is important to interpret.
Yeah, definitely. And as junior, I was a junior person, and I know many junior people go through this as well. We need to go through to build foundation, and to build foundation, that means sometimes you have to do transactional work. That is probably not fun. Go through your Excel files line by line. Go and check, the meeting rooms that you're going to be hosting an event or a meeting. So those transactional things that might be, you might think that's really boring, or you're beneath, you're above it. But honestly, those are the things that have a lot of learning as well. I'm a true believer that every task that you're given, there is a learning behind it. So that's where I think the foundation is important. And it's also the line manager's responsibility to be able to explain what the learning could be. Because sometimes we want it to just leave it to the individuals to interpret, but not everybody can see it from a different lens sometimes. So there's a two-way part, being receptive to learning. The other side is actually teaching and coaching what you can get out of every situation.
As the older people in my culture say, you're wise beyond the years. Because exactly what you're saying. At your age, to be able to interpret that. That's why I said it's only a few more years before that thing is coming through. So we got a note here from Sarah. Sarah Al Ashkar. She says she's a phenomenal leader. She was my line manager and taught me some of the most valuable lessons. Raw, real, unfiltered.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so Sarah, I worked with for almost a good 1 year in Hong Kong, and she is one of those young talent that is extremely ambitious, and I think we work really well together because we were able to debate very openly, and also at the same time, I wanted to impart what I've gone through for her, and at the same time, she has taught me a lot as well. So again, I really think the next generation has so much to offer if we give them that space and that trust.
Okay, so you just dropped another nugget. It's a two-way street. You learn from Sarah, Sarah learns from you. Older leaders wants the whole learning process to be one side. They learn everything from me, but the true learning comes from we share from each other. You bring insights because of your age difference, because of the way you view your career, that I probably would not see through that lens.
Yeah.
Great nugget.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Can you speak a little to that? It's how where did you learn that from? Getting into corporate, where did you learn that from? To that the two-way street kind of. I can learn from my team. My team also can learn from me. That just kind of pop in, and that's my kind of personality, or what?
Yeah, I actually learned it through experiences that I did not enjoy. So, going through my corporate years when I was starting out in Malaysia, so I was again very privileged to be in the program, very stretched, and I was also directly reporting to very senior managers across the HR department. And from there were managers that I truly connected with, that gave me a lot of trust. I can really open up and have very open conversations. And there were also, of course, other managers who've been in a company for a very long time, that have had 30 years of experience. So for them, they are very headstrong into what the way should be. They have one view of how things are done. And those are the managers that will always be critiquing the smallest of detail. And I did enjoy that experience, because some of them I truly couldn't see the value it brings. And that's where I've learned. And also those individuals are the ones that I probably would not be able to have that open two-way conversation. So knowing what I liked and what I didn't like kind of shaped into how I am. I also learned it from my first line manager experience. So I was about 3 years of working experience when I became the first time line manager, and I'm gonna be very honest, on reflection, I really feel that I was an atrocious line manager, because I applied everything that I went through, all the grind, all the critical work and feedback I've received, and I molded that experience for my direct report the same way as what I went through. I expected her to be the same way. And that was one of my biggest early mistakes. And I'm glad I've made those. And today we're still in good terms. So, we're able to amend that relationship. But those are the kind of mistakes that I've seen, I've gone through. And also I myself was in that position of behaving poorly, that I am now able to really reflect and learn that, the best relationship for an effective team is that two-way conversation, two-way feedback, and always give room for opinions, because opinions are generally free. Just give that space for conversation. Whether it works or not, it doesn't quite matter. At least the other person get to view it, get to voice his opinion, and then you get to have a good debate about it. Yeah.
That is a key, because of the fact that these leaders impart behaviors, and if I'm impacting and giving you those type behaviors, if you take that forward, you're ruining other people. And if you never step back to analyze that, to say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable in this suit, I'm going to change this around. And so we talked earlier about being authentic, and what you found out was that this just wasn't you, and you knew it wasn't working. But that's great, being able to do that, because there's so many times where you find dysfunctions in organizations. It comes from these people who know everything, and the conversation is all one-sided.
Yeah, completely. And I think it's also about time we realize the world is shifting and evolving so quickly. I genuinely don't believe that anyone can say that I know everything. It doesn't matter if your organization has been there for, a century. You have your fixed ways of working, your governance, everything's in place. But your customer base is different, your consumer base is different, your employee base is different. So everything is a continuous evolving learning journey, which adaptation becomes really important. Agility is important, but then the willingness to really unlearn and relearn is more important than ever before, based on the people that you're engaging.
Wise beyond your years, unlearn and relearn. Oh my goodness, you're using all of my terms. And exactly. This is why I say I think the greatest thing can happen in organizations is that when the older leaders stage left and younger leaders come in. Not that I'm saying every young leader is going to come out and max it out, but the level of insight that they're going to bring in, it comes from a different era. Because if our customer mix changed, we would address the customer and make changes, product line or whatever it is. But your employee mix, which is your customers, are changing, but we still keep moving the same way.
Exactly. Very, very true. And I honestly am really enjoying this new generation coming in. So there's a lot of research being done by the big firms, by saying like by 2025, which is just a couple of years to come, 75% or even 60% of the organization is going to be made of millennials and the Gen Zs. And I must say, like, they have really come in and changed a lot of the employer and employee relationship. So in BET, we're really proud that we have 4 generations in the workplace. So from your baby boomer all the way to Gen Z, we have a whole spectrum of them. And that's where, especially like from this year onwards after the pandemic, there's a lot more realization that ways of working has to really change. The culture and the leadership style has to really shift as well. Because these young people are bold. I think if you give them the space, they are actually extremely willing to drive the best with the most passion. You just need to know how to find that motivation in them.
Yes. And again, it comes back to that leader listening, the two-way kind of approach. So, as you've gone through these journeys, you step back and learn from that. How do you stay motivated? How does Lynn stay motivated? Maybe I had a bad day and I got to bounce back. I've been knowing you for a period of time, so I've talked to you so many times you've had bad days. How do you kind of stay motivated and looking back and keep building?
Yeah. So motivation is a very tricky thing. I think there's definitely no one strategy or one method to it. Even for myself, like every time I do have a dip, I need a different way to bring myself back up. But in general, I think what keeps me motivated is knowing that whatever that I'm doing, whatever role I'm doing, there's something new that I'm learning. When I am able to feel like I'm continuously being developed, that I'm learning something new, that helps me to keep going. Secondly, is the people around me as well, whether it's my team members, my line manager, the stakeholders I'm working with, that I do seek support and also, in a way, comfort from them as well, so that I'm never suffering in silence. Because I think that's extremely important in the workplace, to have that, people that you can go to as a pillar of support. And I am a true believer that you can make actually very genuine friendships in the organization too. You have to try. It will take time, but there will be a couple of people that you will connect with so well that you have the full trust and they trust you as much.
So there's a concept, well, not a concept, but a competency in human resources. And one of those competencies is relationship management.
Yeah.
+1, -1, 2, -3. The speech I gave earlier, I gave a speech at a client site with the executive leadership team, and I talked through that about the relationships you build. You may discount down here, but this is where the power comes from. This is where the learnings can come from, and you take this and you translate it and go up, to do that. But again, as I say, sometimes when you're talking to these people, it's like you're talking to a brick wall.
Yeah.
So
that happens too.
That happens too. And I looked out across the audience, and the majority of the people were young people. And I told the CEO, I said, "You've got a minefield here. You just got to mine it. You have gold sitting here. You just got to mine it. Listen to these people." One of the key findings, and I'm going to run this by you. One of the key findings of the so-called post-COVID, there's so much research being done.
Yeah.
And it's an organization need to, two things. They need to listen more. You need to listen to your people, the same way you listen to your customers. And the other is that you need to communicate more, all levels. What are your thoughts on that concept?
I fully agree, and I'm actually quite surprised how come this concept didn't come by earlier. Because we treat our consumers, our customers, like they are everything for any business, any organization. And we have so many different tools and techniques to actually get closer to the consumers. And that's the mission of every marketing team. It's just, how do we get as close as possible to our consumers, know exactly what they want, and be ahead of the curve. It's exactly the same thing that should have been done for employees, because ultimately these are the people driving the mission and goals of the company. And as much as the consumers, they are also actually your number one consumer base, will probably most likely be in the organization.
So a buddy of mine is a partner at Deloitte, Dejani, and he told me a story one time. He says, in their conference room, they have a red chair. And every time that meeting goes on, the red chair symbolizes the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to think through every decision that's being made, think it through the lens of the customer that's sitting in the red chair. So I take that a step further, and I said that red chair, a purple chair, is your employee base. So as we're making all these big shot decisions, what are they thinking? What is that customer thinking? Because they're the ones that's going to address the customer.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that metaphor?
Yeah, I fully agree. And that's where I think the power of diversity comes to play. I know nowadays the world speaks about diversity a lot more than before. And I think it's definitely on the right track. And I'm not referring to diversity just from a gender equation. I recognize there are certain markets probably that require that gender focus a lot more. But there are also a lot more developed markets that probably is looking at diversity at a bigger spectrum. It covers your gender, your generations, people of different cultural backgrounds, so on and so forth. And that's so important, because whatever you have as an organization, it really mirrors your employee base. It mirrors your consumer base as well. So I truly believe that diversity is important in every leadership team. You should have your local people from those markets, and you should also have the different demographic mix. So the leadership team construct is so important. It really would affect how your culture of the organization will look like, and it also then drives the motivation of what the business is going to deliver for the customers.
So from my side, if I get a call and I got to go meet a client, as I walk into the building, I'm reading the culture. I'm reading the way people react to each other. I'm taking in everything through all the senses because I want to get to that big room to see how many people are in there, and I want to put it through that filter of diversity. In a lot of cases, I go in there and there's all middle-aged to older men. And they're making all these decisions. And, as I was coming in and walking to the area where they were, I see a lot of young people in there. And then as we talk through, what do they got problems with? Engagement, they got problems with turnover, and all these kinds of things, which means that they're not connecting with that customer.
Yeah. And I think
That's
from
a hard
that point of view, sorry,
No,
go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You're the guest.
Yeah, so I think from that point of view, first is really the recognition that things are changing. The world, the workforce is changing. The workplace it needs to adapt and be a safe space for the different people that you're having in the organization and your customers. And even on very senior levels, there are certain leadership teams that I see that probably are not as diverse, but what they have unique to them is the ability to understand, yes, we lack in certain areas. So how do we get that insight to fill the gaps that we currently have? So I think in those situations, that leadership team can still be very effective if they know exactly what their strengths are, and then very bluntly what their gaps are and how they can fix and fill in those gaps. So again, it's staying very close to the employees, knowing who your change champions are, and really driving what can make a material difference to the organization.
I read a quote by Richard Branson, and Branson said, I don't worry about customer satisfaction scores. I worry about employee satisfaction scores. Because if we concentrate on them, they will in turn take care of the customer. And we have to work. He said, I tell all my management leadership team, concentrate to make sure we're creating the right customer experience and all those things. Everything else will take care of itself.
And that's absolutely true. I think it's probably the simplest principle, and probably maybe it's easier said than done, but it will take effort. I think everything that is great will take effort, and it's a continuous effort. It's not a one-off where you do and then you feel great about it. It's a continuously evolving, and employees go through different life stages as well, and that comes with very different priorities in life, and that's where your policies, your practices, your culture will need to really shift and adapt to the right forum, right audience.
Yeah. Every time I hear the word policy, I think about laws and restrictions. Did you see the policy manual? Yes, I saw the policy manual. How many times you wanted me to refer to the policy manual? But that's an old construct. I heard someone say at one of the speeches yesterday, they said, in a lot of cases, we're still managing people from an industrial age concept. Age concept. I'm the boss. I make the decisions, and all you do is abide by that.
Mm-hmm. That's a very unfortunate, but I think that again, many research being done. So every time there's a new source of energy being introduced, we move into a different industrial revolution. So although right now it's not openly being enforced or being spoken about, I think we're now slowly moving into a fifth industrial revolution, where it's all about purpose and inclusivity. It's where automation and humans work together in a more harmonious way. And I truly believe in that, because in the fourth industrial revolution, we're all about digital technology. It's your AI. It's about how do you find smarter ways to get greater insights. And that was all working well, but that was also causing an alarm for how people would be displaced from their jobs. Skill sets are different, and that's true for every industrial revolution. So currently, if we do go into this purpose and inclusivity fifth industrial revolution, is again harnessing the power of technology, which we will always do that, I think, from a human race point of view. But I think more importantly to that is the people coming through are also realizing what is really important to them in life. And there's a quote by Jordan Peterson. So I love how that man thinks. So he was saying that in today's world, when it comes to how people see career, it's no longer their lives revolving around their jobs. It's about how they can define a picture of what a fulfilled life looks like and what role that job plays for them to help them get into that fulfillment. And that's so important. That's why we have all this mental health awareness or the holistic wellness frameworks are in place, future of work about how flexible working looks like. And it's all for this part of fulfillment. And I truly believe that life goes beyond what you do in the workplace. Although you spend probably most of your time in the day in the workplace. Yeah.
Right.
But then that fulfillment at work becomes so important. How do you still carve out time in an employee's day-to-day to help them find that space for them to inject fulfillment into a more holistic work-life relationship?
Everything you said was on point. The challenge I have on my side, and the challenges you've seen, is trying to get the people in the +1 and +2s to understand that. Because I had one leader tell me that I'm so sick and tired of these people talking about work-life balance and all these kind of things. They got a good job. When I was that age, I would have killed to have a job that way. I said, you're anchoring it on another time zone. Don't even go there. But it's hard. It's hard for a lot of these people to realize it's a totally new playbook now.
Yeah, completely. And I also believe that you shouldn't put your own experiences and project it onto others. They might not want the same things. They have very different life experiences, upbringing as anyone else did. So whatever that we went through and were willing to go through might be very different for the next person. And that's a whole realization there.
Yeah, you'll hear some. Well, in my day when I came, I said, nobody's interested today. Nobody's interested in that. That was 2 generations ago. Let's deal with the real world today. And sometimes in discussions, I have to be brutal in the assessment. And in the moment they may get it, but as soon as I leave the door, they're going to revert back to that. So I tell younger leaders, you're going to have to keep pecking away at it. You keep pecking away at the problem, and eventually you may convert them. And like I tell the leaders, the outcome of that is that you're going to lose your best people because they're saying, you know what? I'm sick and tired of coming into work every day and running into a brick wall each and every day, each and every decision. So I'll find some place that will be receptive to my thoughts.
Exactly. And there will be a place like that. I'm sure there are very different cultural, in culture in every organization, and there'll be one for everybody. So if you have somebody who's really good in your organization, why would you want to lose a person from something that you can probably shift? And you're right. Sometimes it wouldn't take one conversation to just, change practices, change the ways. There's a gradual step change that is required, but I think it's really worth it. So it will be a journey. I think the entire leadership pathway is a journey for everyone. It continuously refreshes. You have to learn different ways to drive the business in an agile manner while balancing the workforce capability building. So it's quite a journey, but it's a worthwhile one.
Well, you know what? I'm going to kind of give a different version of that. You get it because you talked about reflecting on this section of that journey. And what did I like? I didn't want to do that, so I'm going to change that. In a lot of cases, the leaders that are in charge, and I'm generalizing here, and the leaders who listen to this, it may be you, but your model is the model, and you're trying to make everyone, force them through that funnel of what you went through. And never in any point in time in your career did you look back and say, was that, oh my God, I was such an idiot. I really need to change that approach. Like my daughter called me out years ago, and she said, stop trying to find the solution for everybody. Sometimes people just want to listen. And I'm like, whoa, okay. Roles have changed. You just schooled me, but I never forgot that.
Yeah.
I never forgot that. But this comes back to the two-way approach that you're talking to. So let me ask you this. So if you're currently, I'm going to say you're CHRO now, and you're responsible for learning and development. A lot of the things we're talking about is building better leaders inside of organizations. How do we, or how would you advise organizations to build a better learning and development approach to grow people like yourselves?
Right. So the thing, when it comes to learning today, good thing with technology that it can be very much democratized. I don't think you need to go into the ways that it was before, at least for me, where there are different programs for different levels of the organization. So for example, when I was a more junior executive, I went through the leading self pathway. When I'm a first-time manager, I go into leading teams pathway and then leading managers path training. But I feel like learning today, there many research done that it has to be in bite size because people are absorbing information in a more impatient way. So it's like really what is the main core messages. But that's also where learning can be opened up to bigger forums and try to minimize that hierarchy. I think that's a very different approach today. And people are just willing to understand both sides. So we put learning programs that are actually a lot more raw and unfiltered. So people are probably aware of theories, but they do want to hear from a real person, what did they go through? So the kind of programs that are more targeted would be the kinds that can teach you both about leadership culture and also, in a way, a reflection as well. For example, we have a program that is targeted towards Asian leaders. So we recognize that for Asian leaders, research done, we see it in our patch of the world as well. They're very strong functionally, very strong technically, but you put them in a forum, they may or may not be as impactful, just because we probably gauge from a first impression point of view, that is how vocal are you, how much do you challenge, and we're probably not as impactful from that sense of definition. So we had a program targeted towards Asian leaders where it's all about driving courage, driving personal impact, and storytelling in practice. So what we did for this one, we brought in leaders who have gone through the same pathway. They've gone through the different leadership pathway and also have gone through multiple mistakes of their own. So being able to show that vulnerability is the kind of learning probably that is more that I've noticed that work the best, because people come out a lot more confident and a lot more willing then to reflect on themselves. So when we want people to learn and develop certain skill sets, there needs to be awareness first, self-awareness. I think there need to be self-awareness. That's for one. The other one is situational self-awareness. So first is understanding yourself. What makes you, what pushes you, and what probably does the opposite. And the other one is, what is your impact to the people that you engage around you? So they're very different things, situational self-awareness and self-awareness. And that's where when you get people to start reflecting, and that probably is where hopefully we see that willingness to be more receptive towards that two-way conversation and feedback.
How did you decide that? How did you learn that? Because I mean, in talking to you, wise beyond your years, and I'm thinking, so I need to be self-aware, because I may come up, I don't really know it's called self-awareness. I just may know that I'm just shy and maybe I don't do well in a group setting and everybody's contributing. And how did you arrive at that? Was that through reading, or was that through someone, a leader, giving you feedback?
So for me personally, it's probably not the most inspiring story, but I actually learned it through really wanting to do amazing in every job that I was given. So I came into the corporate world from a science background. So even in university, I never took on many business courses at all. I took one international business class, and that was just part of humanities. I need to have a tick in the box. So I only took one class, and the rest were all science courses. So I never had a lot of chance of presenting, making a powerful deck, or even Excel work. I never had a lot of exposure to that. So when I went into the corporate environment, I was immediately probably very insecure of myself and how can I deliver a really good job. And at the same time, I was absolutely obsessed with performance rating. I had to get that outstanding rating all the time. So with that, I know I had to really see what makes somebody an outstanding performer and where do I stand against them. So I connected a lot of my peers at the time and I really observed who are the ones that I know are amazing performers and how did they carry themselves and where do I stand in that rank. So there was a lot of self-reflection from me just because I wanted to do well. I was extremely eager to really do well. So I had a lot of that when I was a lot younger. And over time, I did realize that it was a bit unhealthy, my relationship with performance rating. So because that's definitely not one way that is sustainable. So over time, I end up thinking that I probably lost out a lot of learning because I was obsessed with the outcome, a good outcome. So the self-reflection just came out of a bit of a insecurity and wanting to do really well. That eventually that became just part of my personality.
But when I think about that, when you tell that story, and that's a great story, is the people that came in with that concept and thought about it, but they didn't know what to do next. They didn't know what the next step was. This is why I've always, if I ever had to get a corporate, one of the biggest initiatives I would create is a career development process, and I'd want every employee to go through that. It's a
Yeah.
self-reflection, understanding all those things, because I may be sitting there in a meeting and I'm churning inside because I'm afraid, imposter syndrome, and all these things are coming in. I'm looking at every word I say is the right word, and I'm putting myself through mental anguish. And I said
I,
one of the most important things that I think organizations are going to have to address is career development, understanding purpose, all these kinds of things, because you got to take this all of this young talent coming in, and you got to
yeah.
open it up and say it's okay. There's a lot of people feel the same way.
Yeah. And another very impactful thing that I remember doing a lot of is actually just very openly going into managers' room and ask for feedback. So I used to be one of those that constantly ask
Yeah,
for feedback, although I know it's
yeah,
painful. I will walk out the room
mm,
feeling pain, but with a smile nevertheless. But I think that is probably
yes,
the most powerful gift that anyone can give anyone. And I also always try to get feedback from my direct reports. And I can
hmm,
understand probably it's hard for people, especially your team members, to give you very direct
yeah,
feedback. And it will take
yeah,
time to build that. So I will give them
yeah,
anonymous platforms to just give me very honest feedback. And I
yeah,
told them there's no holds barred. So basically anything could be
yeah,
just tell me if I write emails too late at night and it's uncomfortable for people. Like the very simple things.
yeah.
Because
And
ultimately the impact is important. How I make people feel.
yeah, in other words, how am I aggravating you? Well, when I get this email chime, it's 11:30 at night. Yeah, that aggravates me. Yeah,
Yeah.
but see, I think the key vibe I get from you is you're highly self-aware. And what I concern myself with inside of organizations, that people that are not self-aware and they're sitting there and for them going to work is torture. And this is why when people started working from home, I think a lot of people are just glad to be at home and can still do it from a distance, because maybe the workplace is too much pressure. Too much pressure on succeeding, too much pressure on being obsessed
Yeah.
with this and the other and all these kinds of things. Let me just work from home because I can do great work, but I don't have the pressure of the surroundings that I
Yeah.
feel as if I'm being squashed.
Yeah. That's a really fair point. I think sometimes hiding behind, well, not really hiding, but when you talk and engage behind a screen, it's
Yeah,
just less confrontational or less intimidating.
yeah,
But I think for
yeah,
those individuals who are probably experienced this, other individuals who are not as self-aware but the impact and how they make people feel, I really hope the organization at least would try to shape the culture in a way that they are accountability partners, at least at the peer level. Sometimes it's
mm,
very difficult for team members to actually tell their line managers or anybody senior about, how certain behaviors are not the most appropriate or the most
yeah,
favorable. But at least at the peer level, there should be some accountability there to collectively shape how the organization feel. So I really believe for senior managers, so let's say if you're the head of functions or head of departments within a function, a bigger forum, you don't have your accountability is not just within your direct team. Your impact would expand across the organization. Everybody would see
right,
you as a very senior
yeah,
person, and however you behave is also what they would feel from an impact point of view. So at the senior level, when you are part of a leadership team or group, you have that collective shared accountability to really shape the culture and the experience for the employees. And it goes
yeah,
beyond that because I myself find inspiration and motivation from managers who are not directly in HR. They're from the business
mm,
side. And I go to these different individuals for very different mentoring um,
mm,
topics. And I'm the one that believes that mentors exist everywhere. You don't have to assign me a
yeah,
fixed mentor
yeah,
for a year or so. I would just go to different
yeah.
individuals who I see are emulating certain behaviors that I require support on. And that's how an
You know,
organization are always watching the leaders.
yeah, key. Someone is always watching.
Yeah.
They're watching your mannerism. They watch the way you respond to people, all these kind of things. And that multiplies inside of an organization. And that
Yeah.
creates culture, because
Yeah.
a manager out of control. No, the organization's out of control because the organization allows it to happen.
Yeah.
because the organization could come in and deal with it right away, or whatever way you want to deal with it, because we don't treat people this way. So I remember reading an article during COVID of a CEO who was very people oriented, technical and people. And every Friday, he would pen a letter to his workforce, talked about what he was working on, some key thoughts he had, what he's concerned about, what he's struggling with. And it's kind of been opening my heart to all of you. But at the end of that, he says, I don't know all the answers. If you have solutions, if you need to share something, send me an email, share it with the group, because we're all struggling. And I'm like, wow, you're talking about a master class. That's a master class right
Yeah,
there. Because
it is.
you open up 1,500, 2,000 people to say it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. And that, I think, is exactly what today's organization is looking for. That
Mm.
vulnerability part is so powerful. It doesn't mean you're lesser of a leader. Leaders don't all have to come with the strongest front and, be all like
Yeah.
stone hard and not being able to read at
Yes.
all. But I
So
think vulnerability goes a long way. People would rally behind you a lot stronger when you're able to show and share that shared sentiment that I
yeah,
don't know the answers. I'm worried too, but we got this together. I think that's
yeah.
so powerful. And I think the leaders that I connected the most are the ones that will openly be vulnerable with me to share their experiences.
Mm,
And I
mm.
try to always do the same with my team. Yeah.
So the other key point I said, when I walk into an organization, first, I watch everything. I watch the offices of people just standing around the doorway and just chatting, and I see who's sitting behind the desk. Because when I see a leader standing and there's people are gathered around, they're just sharing conversation. You can't even tell leader boss dynamic because they're just sharing it as people.
Yeah.
Because these are the key points that you notice of people, leaders in organizations who get it and realize
Yeah.
people are the solutions to it. Corn Ferry says 70% of the performance of a team is determined by the person in charge of that team because that person creates the climate for the team.
Yes. Definitely. Psychological safety.
Psychological safety. All the key words. You got it all.
Yeah, I it's exactly because I feel like it's exactly what I was looking for throughout my career, and I can safely say I have a very good experience right now, and I just want to ensure that I create the same for everyone because I sometimes do fall back into holding my own principles. That's for a start, but secondly, I think some people may say that I probably am very naive when I voice out certain unpopular opinion. But I feel like that naivete is actually what probably made me the most authentic person I can be, and I feel comfortable and happy in that workplace that way.
Mm. And you know when they say you're naive, you want to flip it over and say, no, you're the one. You're the one that's
Yeah,
being naive. You calling me that, but I need to also turn that back to you. So as we begin the process of closing out, uh, tell us about important influences in your life that have shaped you to become the leader you are today.
yeah. I think what I always try to hold true are just my very basic principles or what was important to me in life, not just at work. Before I go to work, I kind of hold what I care about in life. So I grew up in a relatively it's a city, but it's a very small, almost like a town. And I think from that point of view, the sense of community was important.
Mm,
And what
mm,
also shaped me was just the upbringing that I had that is always to be human first, treat everybody
yeah.
with respect. So in the
Mm,
organization, in the workplace, I always ensure that it doesn't matter what the person's role or the job is, I treat everybody as equal human and full of respect. And from there you realize that everybody is so much more willing to be collaborating
there
with
we
you.
go. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so part of my upbringing was that. In terms of people that really influenced me was line managers that gave me so much trust from the get-go. So I had one
Okay.
of my HR directors when I was in Malaysia. Probably she was the one that really shaped my entire development and accelerated it a lot more. When I didn't believe in myself, she was the one that pushed me so hard to be in forums that I am not comfortable being at all. So
Okay.
I was, in my mid 20s and not having the most emotional
Yeah.
maturity just yet, she forced me into a forum of about 30 leaders who were all, very senior. and I was actually just a mid-level manager, and I get so intimidated in that forum, but she was the one that constantly pushed me and tell me that, no, I want you to be in there. You should learn in that forum, and eventually I want to see you speak up there. So I think that constant push and that belief when I didn't have it really shaped me too. And I was
kind of like, go ahead, because I'll give you the thought in just a minute. Go ahead, finish that.
So I've had really good privilege with like really good line managers that had a lot more experience that really shaped my acceleration, because they imparted their experience onto me. So when they paid forward to me, I kind of learned a lot quicker. And that's how I'm able to really accelerate my career as well, while really learning what is impactful, what is not, and what is my core personal brand as well. So those are the influences that I really have. And then, of course, there are micro influences around me. It's just almost daily observation of the kind of leadership style and behavior and thinking that I want to adopt. So I think, stealing with pride when it comes to what looks good is actually a good thing. You don't have to recreate everything that makes you who you are. There are people's behaviors and principles that you just resonate with and be like, I'm going to amplify that more.
I was laughing when I asked you that question and you responded to that, because I tend to do that with you. I'll say, stop it. I will pull your when we're going into conversations over the years and you go to the left, I said, stop it, come back and get back on. Yeah. So I was laughing. I said, that sounds like me, because I do the same thing to you.
Yes, you are definitely one of them.
Yeah. Cool. So we talk about leadership lessons in life, that are grounding of key people. As your career progresses and you're now CHRO, years to come, what is the one thing that you would say, you know what, I want to change this, and this is what we're going to do going forward? Do you have kind of a key purpose that you would like to kind of instill in a workforce, from being able to really change that now because you're top of the pyramid?
Yeah. The spans and layers of organization. So the more layers that you have really is not going to be conducive for any kind of culture you're trying to set. People, when you just minimize the layers, have a flatter organization, and really trust the people to own up to their roles and responsibilities and empowerment area. Give them the clarity of where my accountability starts, where does it stop, and give the team members that full empowerment. And one thing that I think I want to really instill in organization and across any employee group, is actually try to instill that culture and that coaching of ensuring that people don't take other people's experiences as their own. Give them that space to experience things for themselves. Before anyone starts, don't go and try to, intoxicate anybody's mind with what experiences should look like. Like, don't go into this role because it's too difficult. Don't work with this person because he's difficult. But it's really give them that space to experience everything for themselves. That's from a cultural point of view. So once you have that flatter organization, every communication becomes a lot more seamless. And the more we can break from a hierarchy point of view, I think that's really what's going to propel the organization forward, especially with that mix of next generation coming through, where hierarchy is not what they are used to at all. And it really, I think there's a lot of benefits coming from breaking hierarchy.
And I love the word you used, intoxicating, that intoxicating culture, because that's exactly what it is. You know what? I'm going to give you some advice. I think you would do very, very well I'm going to use the term, as an expert on a millennial workforce, because everything you're saying is the same thing I've been saying, and it's hard to get through. So maybe coming from a person that's in that generational pull or that demographic would connect more. So it's kind of like the worker who works on the assembly line would know more about it than I would if I'm in charge of the assembly line. And saying that to say, next time someone comes to me to say, we're looking for someone who can kind of give us some insight on the new workforce, I'm going to say, I know the exact person, because that would be you. Because you basically walked us through a master class of the changing dynamics of the workforce. And you did it in a pleasing way without trying to preach and point fingers like I tend to do sometimes.
Oh, thank you so much, Ron. I think it helps being a millennial and also going through leadership under very different generations as well.
Yeah. So thank you so much. What time is it in Malaysia now?
It's almost 10 p.m. right now.
Oh, almost 10 p.m. Okay, so it's almost 7 p.m. here in Islamabad, Pakistan. So thank you so much for being a part of the CEO series. And so I say the CEO series, we bring together the most amazing people, leaders, entrepreneurs, different levels of thinking. And this is what we try and impart on the audience. So thank you so much for being a part of it. Any closing statements you want to make before we close out? And I want you to stay on after you finish.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ron, for having me. It's been such a great pleasure. I think the way forward is basically what I really want to organize the audience to know is there's so much space and empowerment that you have. So don't ever undermine how much you can influence in whatever role that you hold. The voice of the organization can be so powerful, and it starts with you. And in whatever role you hold, you have that space, and don't ever undermine what kind of influence you can actually drive for organizational change.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Hold on for a second as we close out.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ron, for having me.
Okay, cool. I'm going to be closing out in just